What's up, Patreons? As promised, I told you I had some explosive. All of you were lied to. All of you were completely lied to. Y'all remember Bill Cosby, and a lot of people said, oh, his beef with NBC, he wanted to buy it. And this is what the outcome was. Ennis was killed. And, this whole thing was a conspiracy theory. How could this happen? And blah, blah, blah. Right? You've heard all the conspiracy theories. And his son died because Bill tried to buy NBC. Right? Now, get ready, because for the first time, you're going to hear the truth. There's a lot of moving parts in Ennis Cosby's sad and death was very weird, to say the least. Very weird. Now, the reason why this is weird is because the story makes no sense. Ennis Cosby was coming off the 405, or coming down the 405 expressway, where he contacts a friend that he just met 5 nights ago, a Stephanie Crane. In one story, it was listed that it was his girlfriend, Stephanie Crane. Calls her as to say, I'm changing a tire. I need some light to be shed on my car because it's so dark I can't see. So I need you to come flash some lights. Right? Then the story says this man who was out drinking at a bar and looking for drugs at a payphone was with some friends of his and doing drugs all night, whatever. He's looking for drugs, wanders on the 405 and runs into Ennis Cosby and the girl. First he goes up to her, she taps on the glass with the gun, she takes off and drives, but then turns and loops back around to see if Ennis is okay. Right? She heard a shot. She looks up. She can't see Ennis. And she sees the guy running off or whatever. So she gets out the car and see Ennis has been harmed fatally. Now, this is where the story is told that makes zero sense whatsoever. And said he was gonna rob him, but the guy said, hey, hold up. And he was, how dare this N-word say this to me? Who do he think he is? And so he shot him. Right? Now we got to get to the gist of it. Because this sounds retarded. All of it. Because all of it is a lie. That's right, good people. You've been lied to. And no one was going to question it, because why would you question it? It was just so hellaciously heinous that it just did not make any sense. Now, why did all this take place? You have to go all the way back. And when I mean all the way back, this is going back to when the Cosby Show was in its last 2 seasons. Cosby had agreed he'll do the show another 2 seasons. Now, he was going to end the show and go into movies. NBC did not want this. And the reason why they didn't want this is because there was a massive problem. NBC was losing money on television shows and programming that they had at the time. And the Cosby Show was the only real moneymaker that they had besides A Different World that was continuing to move forward. Bill had grew tired of doing the Cosby Show and was wanting lesser responsibility and wanted more of the cast to shine more than him. Now, it was so many people who were coming after Bill and NBC because they're like, look, we got a moneymaker. We don't need, we don't need the conflict. We don't need the division. What we need is people coming together. So stay with the family. So Cosby says, no, I'm going to end the show and probably retire altogether and just go back to doing comedy and writing. And like, I'm going to write some treatments for some programs. But I'm becoming exhausted, he was saying, from just acting and showing up and, spending all this time in the studio. I'm growing tired of it. I'm an old man. This is a young man's game. So Bill's interest in buying NBC is coming back around. Now, this is when the Cosby Show is off the air and is done. He tried to buy it before he left, threatening to leave the network. And they said, well, Norman Brokaw was like, listen, if you keep going down this road, Bill, this might be too much for me to bring you back from. And Norman Brokaw is the executive, the chief executive of WMA, the William Morris Agency. And he says, he tried to talk him out of it. And the president, Robert Wright, sat down with Bill Cosby and they discussed an intention to make an offer for NBC. And Mr. Wright talked to the partners in the board and came back and told Mr. Cosby, NBC is not for sale. But it was for sale. They just didn't want to sell it to Cosby. And he knew that. But it was unfair, the practices that they were using to disclose this. Now, RCA came along and they overbid it for it. Bill had $4 billion that he was going to be able to get. General Electric paid $6.5 billion when it bought it. Then it took RCA. Now it sold RCA off and got other television properties like the cable, the CNBC. So General Electric came in and, took over. Right? Now, no one talked about the whole thing, but Brokaw denied everything. So now Bill Cosby is like, I'm leaving NBC altogether. Now the Cosby Show is off the air. NBC is doing all of these shows that are failing. Now, after these shows are failing, the transition takes place. Kind of a huge deal. At the time, Bill's net worth was about $300+ million. So he had access to billions if he needed it. Now, Carsey and Warner, they ended up having this 8-year run on NBC where that syndicated sales run of the Cosby Show is going to be approaching $1 billion in syndication. So everybody's like, wait a minute. If we have Bill Cosby buying the network, Bill has warm feelings about NBC. He's got this break here almost 30 years ago with I Spy. And then he had the most financial successful show of all time in the 80s. I could see him wanting to, fix this situation and get it done right here. And he claimed it was about, making good people and all of these different things. So now the Paramount Communications, Bill Diller, who used to work at Fox, Paramount was like, we were going to buy it. And Bill, we want you to be in charge. So Bill was going to be a partner with Paramount and come in to acquire the deal. But GE went up to $6.5 billion. And no one was going to compete with that. So, it was given away. Now, here's the situation. General Electric are now the guys running the ship. And the stock is dropping. There's no Cosby there. And it's okay if Bill wanted to walk away because he was old. But he didn't walk away. Came out with a show called Cosby on CBS. And it's got basically him and the wife again playing the same role, Felicia Rashad. So now it looks like the older version of the Cosby Show. And the names are different. And, they have good chemistry together, of course. They had all those years. And the show just didn't hit. like the Cosby Show as it did on CBS. But CBS was ready to take on all the Cosby television series, give him all access to everything, and see what happens. And what happened was you had a lot of incomplete characteristics and characters. Some characters that shouldn't have been released and are having a film on. The answer was right there all along. But that's neither here nor there. The network was losing because Cosby went over to CBS. And it wasn't like they were killing the ratings. They have Cosby, and that's not good. When you have your syndication and your programming, after all these years, he's going to CBS and he's not coming home to NBC with this new network. Now it's like the Cosby Show has moved to CBS. That takes a lot of the subscribing stockholders and everything else. And this is after the stock, like they're building up their stock and selling it and expanding, unilaterally. And that's when I noticed things started to really change. So we're going to get into all this. Turns into Ennis. You see, Ennis, his problem was simple. He was an innocent person, completely innocent of any atrocities whatsoever. Now, just like any other father with their son, there's always going to be turmoil and back and forth, butting of heads. This is the only known son of Bill Cosby we know. And, Bill Cosby was a scholar. Things came to him very easy. His wife, also very smart, athletic. Bill Cosby ran track, but he was also had his doctorates, professor. He could have done anything besides comedy. Ennis was just like the Theo character on the show. So he basically wrote about his own family. And Theo would constantly get bad grades. And it would annoy Bill Cosby. And the way he was with Theo on the show was how he was with Ennis, except for there was no jokes and punchlines. He was real stern. So he was thinking maybe the boy's just stupid. Maybe he's just dumb. So the wife takes him to be tested to see if there's anything medically wrong. And it was a good thing they did, because they found out he suffered from dyslexia. And this didn't happen until he was out of high school, going to Morehouse College. And he said, oh my God. It was like he was tired of always being confused. That was his problem. He was always confused. He didn't know why, but he was always confused. And the fact that someone actually explained to him what was going on, and he had a reason, and they saying, no, this is what's wrong with you. You suffer from dyslexia. It was like someone took a weight off his shoulders. So how did he choose to respond to this? Well, he took another route. He decided that he was going to sorry about that. He decided it would be in his best interest to go and get his accomplishments and move on to a state of where he's going to be a doctor. Him and his dad are kind of not getting along. Well, they get along, but it's an icy kind of relationship with father and son. He doesn't want to do the things Bill wants him to do. He wouldn't even tell anybody Bill Cosby was his father. He said, my father, he's in business. What's your father's name, William? So he didn't want people to know. Now, let's get to the nitty-gritty. General Electric, who's been owning NBC since 1986, Cosby was trying to make a play with a team to get a piece of it because they're getting ready to sell parts of NBC. Okay, they dibbled off the radio and now, they got NBC. But the word is out. They're selling. But they don't want to sell to Bill Cosby, nor his team. This is going to lead to black ownership. This is going to be a problem, even though we like Bill. Bill would not listen. He was going to take it to the media. He was going to take it everywhere and expose NBC. And what he meant by NBC was General Motors. You see, Bill Cosby is the funny man you see on TV, but you don't know Vicious Bill. He can get really mean when he needs to. So he turns to his Hollywood friends and he has them digging into General Electric to find out all the devious things that they have been doing. And they found out connections they had to certain people who did certain horrific acts to people in Hollywood for whatever the reason may have been. And how they were involved in a lot of criminal activity. This was not going to sit well with the people at GE who found out Bill Cosby is prying into their business. That's going way beyond what's happening at NBC. So Bill Cosby was warned. Treading down this path is going to lead to something very drastic. So, he's no longer at NBC. He's on CBS. He starts his new show titled Cosby. And it's like Cosby's going to CBS. NBC and their programming and their relationship with Cosby is now in jeopardy. But they can't harm Bill Cosby. Bill's ego is so high, he's only thinking about how much value he is to the company being alive. If they kill Bill Cosby, they kill all the chances of him making a show, doing all these different things that they need him to do for syndication and everything else. It wasn't like, oh, he's died, and oh man, let's rewatch the episodes, and that'll fade away at times. So Cosby was still a hot commodity at this time. So they need him to be Bill Cosby. They need him to be alive. They need him on that stage working. Now, here's the thing. They knew all about Bill's past, but they couldn't use that because it would tarnish him, which would make the syndicated shows for replay value worthless. So they'll be shooting themselves in the foot with their largest commodity, which was Bill Cosby. Now, Ennis drives a car that belongs to his father. He goes out to do basically a campaign, right? They did a campaign. And they went to a party, and, Bill and his son collided because he assumed his son was gay. Bill assumed that his son was messing around, sleeping with one of his male friends. This, Ennis denied. He was angry, and he had been away from home, but he was living his own life. They had a fight over that. Ennis met this girl who liked him and was very nice, and he had just met this girl 5 days ago before his death. 5 days. So apparently, in this story that makes no sense. Now, let me tell you how much sense this does not make. This Stephanie Crane, who, according to the phone records, called at 1 o'clock in the morning because he had a flat tire. So she jumps out of bed, do her hair and her makeup, put over a fur coat, over a mini dress, put on high heels, and came to rush to his aid. Let that sink in. Because according to her, she was in bed. So you jumped out of bed, put on makeup, did your hair, put on a fur coat over that mini dress, put on some high heels to come out and help a man changing a tire. That's what happened. Sounds highly, highly unlikely. Now, after meeting Stephanie at this party, they had already knew everything about Ennis. This was put into play by the powers at General Motors. As Cosby continued to try to find ways to sabotage their company, they decided to fracture his life. General Electric is connected to the Israeli mob, Chinese mob, Russian mob. But this was done in a joint effort to use these Israeli mob that they use in California in connection with people with ties to the Chinese mafia. This would have to be strategically done, and it will be handled on the other end, the legal end. That was their way of taking care of it. Here's what really happened. Now, Ennis, who was at a friend's house, met Stephanie Crane at a party. Stephanie Crane was given all this information about Ennis before she met him. Now, when these people meet, when they met, rather, they became close friends in less than 5 days. So at this party, she pretended to have similar interests in things that Ennis cared about. She never mentioned his father. This woman was very connected and was knew she was setting this man up from the very beginning. Now, let's go from there. They claim, her story is that she pulled up behind his Mercedes on the side of the dark, deserted road so he could see, as she shined her headlights, making it easier for him to change the tire. Then she said the shooter, whose nickname is Pee-wee, came to the car, tapped on the glass of the window, and said that she had to open the door. or he would kill her. So she drove off, but only about 50 feet up the road. Then she had a blinding moment of regret and good Samaritanness. She turned around and came back for Ennis. And when she comes back, the Pee-wee guy had already shot him and killed him and ran off into the dark. This was her story. She became the woman in the fur coat. Now, as that sounds very insane, it just doesn't make any sense. We know he called her. Phone records prove that. But literally everything else is based on witness testimony. Testimony that does not make any sense. See, here's the things that rings alarms to me. Look at the photo that I'm showing you now. None of this doesn't add up to their story. Where the crime scene is, there's nothing there. I mean, the most nothingest place ever is right there. It is completely pitch black. So, a carjacker that only stakes out victims in rural areas, that's one. And is barely pulled off the road to change a flat tire or wait for a tow truck. His car was a good way out into the right lane when he parked. He didn't even pull all the way over. You call a woman you barely know to help you change a tire in the middle of the night. And that woman coming dressed up like she just went to the nightclub, who claims she just got out of bed. And she did not even notice the killer, whose name is Mikhail, walking on the side of the road. She didn't hurt the guy when she sped away from the scene, despite the fact he was standing right next to the driver's side door. Ennis got out of his car as Stephanie sped away. In spite of seeing this strange man with a gun tapping on her window, right? And all of this evidence, right, presumably making locations of the billet casings, it's crazy. Now, this is what's the craziest part about it. The bullet casings are behind Ennis's car on the passenger side, not in front of the driver's side. So this tells me after speeding off. He walked to the passenger side of the car of just approaching Cosby's driver's side. Now, let's get to the other side, people. Because this is her side of the story, of this ridiculous story. Because we're going to get behind what actually went down. The people on this party now, Eli Zachariah was put in charge to execute this hit, to coordinate it. Eli Zachariah, who is he? He's part of the Russian Khazarian Jews, the JDL, or you can call them the Israeli mob. He's the younger addition. His father was already in prison, Joseph Zachariah, the known hitman for the Russian mafia. He was there that night with his girlfriend, Sarah Ann Peters, and they was with Mikhail. This is not a lie. This is actual fact. It's not conspiracy theory. They claim they were partying. They pulled over to use a payphone. And as they used the payphone, right, the guy, Mikhail, decides, I'm going to go for a walk and pick a car, which means carjack. Finna go pick a car because they went to make a call to try to get more drugs. They've been doing drugs all night and wanted to do some more drugs. He goes walking off and they heard a bang. Then he comes running back down and then he ends up getting in the car. And we take off. And from there, they said he went somewhere. And he wrapped the 38 pistol up and hid it by a tree. Right? So this is their story that they're telling. Now, this is very vital. Carlos Rodriguez, who was supposed to be the cover man. Then here comes the Chinese mafia. Michael Chang and Christopher So. We're going to get to their participation, but they're also connected with the Chinese mob. Now, just by coincidence, Rodriguez, Crane, Peters, Zachariah, and the actual shooter, Mikhail Marhaizovich, Ziv, or whatever, are all Jewish people. All have some criminal records. Seem to do a lot of work in the Hollywood industry. Now, even though they were with The actual shooter, Eli Zachariah and Sarah Ann Peters, was never called to testify in the case. Zachariah was 23, Peters was 21. Now, they said they went to a drug dealer at a bank payphone, right? Zachariah and Peters just heard the bang. They were trying to get drugs. They didn't know why he did it. And they never testified to this in court. They weren't charged with anything. And they didn't give their testimony in court. See, the Israeli connection is clear and undeniable. As you know, the son of the hitman was given his first task, major task, at a young age to orchestrate this and put this together. It was high profile. And it needed to be someone taking the blame for this heinous crime. Now, what was weird is that after the murder, the National Enquirer of their own put up $100,000 for the reward of anybody leading to the arrest of the killer when he was out. Now, this is what makes it crazy. It was done in a way that no one probably ever would have known who the killer was. But they couldn't have everyone in fear over there in that area. So, what they did was virtually unthinkable. They set up a whole big plan. As his father was got second-degree assault charges for a family that was mutilated, parts cut off back in '85. Right? So that's why Zachariah is behind prison. You see, there was a ruse about a false tire or whatever going down. The truth is, he was lured there. The person who was in need, or faked like they were in need, was Stephanie Crane. When he talked to Stephanie, it wasn't that he needed help with a flat tire. The conversation was, She needed help. And Ennis went to meet her as she waited on the side of the road. Up the street is the getaway car that had Peters and Zechariah waiting as the hitman is waiting for this action to take place. Her car is directly behind Ennis to flash the light on Ennis's car. When Ennis pulls up. Why? It's very simple. She moved it there. He pulled in front. She turned the lights on. Now the killer can see exactly what he needs to do to kill Ennis. He's got proper light. Ennis was shot from the passenger side because he came out of those dark bushes and shot him. There wasn't an exchange for words. This wasn't a robbery, as they claimed in their statements. He just was going to steal the car. Well, that was a $135,000 Mercedes. Why didn't he steal it? Ennis had on a Rolex. He didn't take it. He had $1,000 in his pocket. They didn't take it. So if you was on a quest for drugs, and the drugs was what you cared about so much, that was the access to get a lot of drugs. They puncture his tire, and then the flat tire story exists. This is what you have now in the world today. When a car is barely pulled off the road on the side, for anyone to try to fix a flat tire, they would be over a little bit more than that, because they were afraid of getting hit with a car coming by. That's not over far enough. A lot of red flags, buddy. But do you know all of these red flags didn't matter? The courts didn't care. They got the guy they want. These are powerful men. And let's get to the Chinese connection. Now that you know what really happened, let's get to the National Enquirer. The National Enquirer decided they have something very interesting. And now that they got something interesting going on, they have $1,000 reward, $100,000 for the capture. And two people came forward. A Christopher So. He came forward. But not just him. It was him and a friend. Another Chinese guy. I'm trying to think of his name. Because the lawyer brought them up in court. Trying to think. I think the guy's name is Chang. And they both was convicted felons, if I'm not mistaken. But both were convicted felons, that I do know. And they came forward with the reward story that implicated Mikhail as the, aka Pee Wee, as the killer. Now, because he said that Christopher So and this Chang guy were both convicted felons, that was their motivation for the story implicating him. And other key witnesses had credibility problems. They had an informant named Tracy West, had cocaine charges in New Jersey. But Zachariah and Peters, who were 21 and 23 at the time, had been convicted of drug-related offenses. They were facing burglary charges before. And as you already know, who his father was. So with this whole thing going down, with So getting the money and everything else, Christopher So got a reward for tipping off the National Enquirer to the whereabouts of the murder weapon. So now, where does Carlos Rodriguez come in? He was the guy that ran the cover story for them. You see, Zachariah was a kingpin in this hit. So when Crane, she was being a key cover agent in this whole thing. And the uncle is Carlos Rodriguez. He ran cover for them, saying that the three of them were high on drugs and looking for a drug dealer to find more. And they were doing all this in a highly dark, relatively offbeat area. So he tells the world, he told me he was out of it. That means out of cocaine. And when they pulled over to use the phone, that's what he gave to the police when the three friends picked up a phone in a park and ride lot, which is 450 feet down the road from the isolated spot where Cosby was killed at. He had pulled off the Interstate 405 to repair a flat tire on his father's 137,000 Mercedes-Benz. He was lured to this spot so that he could be killed without witnesses. That's what you need to know. Wasn't a random shooting. And just into 2004, this man, 2001, I believe, he has claimed his innocence, saying that he didn't do it. This guy they call Pee Wee, McKaylee. Then, after that, all the way up into 2001, he finally gave up and said, I'm giving up all my appeals. I did take that man's life. And now I finally realize it and come to terms with this is where I'm going to be for the rest of my life. Now, is this man even in jail? You and I will never know now. As you can see, Bill Cosby was told while he was filming the show Cosby, and as he was filming the show Cosby, this was told to him. Ennis was buried in 3 days. He died, and 3 days later he was buried. Bill knew he failed to protect his family. He did not know what extreme they would go, but he knew this wasn't an accident. He knew what happened. He just couldn't let his wife sit through that anymore because he had failed Ennis. He was in a dark, dark place after that. Then he came back again to try to buy NBC. Years after the fact. There was whispers saying that Bill Cosby set up his own son's death. As Ennis is buried on the Cosby's land so quickly, they didn't want an autopsy done. They didn't want any. They just wanted to get their son buried on their land as quickly as possible. You are allowed certain tax write-offs and percentages as it becomes a mausoleum or a burial site. So it becomes the Cosby Memorial, Family Memorial. And once you have that, you're allowed it to not be taxed for allowing, this to be your memorial grounds. And then on top of this, on top of this, they could never take the land away from you. Even in foreclosure or bankruptcy, it protects the property. So a lot of people alluded that Bill actually set this up. His anger of his son. And I don't believe that because of the people who were involved. Cosby would have never used these people to do such a heinous act, and I doubt he would do something that heinous to his son. Their disapproval of one another was never at this point, and never would Cosby have done anything like this. But they were trying to whisper this around Hollywood that, hey, maybe Cos set this up, because these people didn't want fingers pointing back at them. This is how much they care about blacks not owning anything. This is the extreme in which people are willing to go to destroy your lives. So All right, Patreon VIP members, God bless.